Welcome to Witnessing Jesus Christ at Lisbon Gives Grace. What's up? What's up, beloved? In today's video, we're going to dive into the fascinating story of Enoch. He's a truly remarkable figure mentioned in the Bible, known for his exceptionally holy and faithful life dedicated to the Lord. As the great-grandson of Adam and the great-grandfather of Noah, Enoch lived for over 300 years and fathered several descendants, including Methuselah, the longest living man recorded in the entire Bible. What's even more extraordinary is that Enoch is one of only 2 individuals in the Bible who was taken directly to heaven, completely escaping death. We'll also explore the intriguing, though pseudonymous, Book of Enoch in our discussion today. Your support helps this channel grow. Before we jump in, I'd like to ask for your help. Please subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any new content. If you enjoy this video, please give it a like. It truly helps me produce more videos for you. Without further ado, let's get right into it. God's plan in the meaning of names. Did you know that the meaning of Enoch's name, teaching, or instruction is directly connected to God's ultimate plan, even foreshadowing the birth of Jesus Christ? This is because the meanings of names from Adam all the way to Noah's descendants held significant importance. Consider the example of Enoch's name, whose meaning is even hinted at in the Bible itself. In Genesis 5:29 it says, "And he called his name Noah, saying, Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work, and from the painful toil of our hands." While this verse specifically refers to Noah, the connection between names and divine purpose is evident throughout this lineage. But what's the importance of the meanings of Enoch's descendants? And how does this relate to Enoch himself? Let's analyze the meanings of the names from Adam to Noah in their original languages. Adam means man. Seth means appointed. Enosh means weak and mortal. Kenan means affliction and lamentation. Mahalo means holy God. Jared means from being. Enoch means teaching and instruction. Methuselah means his death will bring. Lamech means absence of hope. Noah means relief and comfort. When we combine these meanings, they form a profound sentence. Man, who is appointed a moral affliction, but the holy God will teach that his death will bring relief and comfort to the hopeless. Now I ask you, who else could this possibly refer to, if not Jesus Christ? The story of Enoch, taken directly to heaven. Enoch is one of only 2 individuals in the Bible who appears to have been taken directly to heaven without experiencing death. Most of us are familiar with the second one, Elijah, the famous prophet, who, after the end of his ministry, was carried to heaven in a whirlwind by a celestial chariot, leaving Elisha to continue his mission. However, many of us don't know much about Enoch, the other person taken directly to heaven. He appears in Genesis, and as soon as he steps onto the scene, he enters heaven. The Bible doesn't explicitly inform us how Enoch was caught up, so let's discuss what the Bible does say about Enoch, any extra biblical information we have, and whether or not it's important for us today. The story of Enoch. Taken directly to heaven, Enoch is one of only 2 individuals in the Bible who appears to have been taken directly to heaven without experiencing death. Most of us are familiar with the second one, Elijah, the famous prophet who, after the end of his ministry, was carried to heaven in a whirlwind by a celestial chariot, leaving Elisha to continue his mission. However, many of us don't know much about Enoch, the other person taken directly to heaven. He appears in Genesis, and as soon as he steps onto the scene, he enters heaven. The Bible doesn't explicitly inform us how Enoch was caught up, so let's discuss what the Bible does say about Enoch, any extra biblical information we have, and whether or not it's important for us today. Why Enoch escaped death. Now, a question arises. Why did the other great heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11 have to go through death, while this enigmatic figure, Enoch, escaped it? Let's analyze this. First, as argued by some, Enoch being caught up serves as an example of what it will be like during the rapture. During this event, God will take believers to heaven at the end of times. While Christians hold differing opinions about the exact timing of the rapture, within the end times timeline, whether it's before the 7-year tribulation, at the halfway point of the 7-year judgment, or after the 7-year tribulation, etc., the consensus is that at some point during the end times, God will snatch believers away, just as he did with Enoch. Second, consider Noah, who lived a few hundred years before the great flood. We see the inhabitants of the earth falling into total moral depravity during that period. Given that people at that time lived for hundreds of years, some Christians speculate this was due to a vapor canopy surrounding the earth, blocking harmful gamma rays and producing a temperate climate. In this thinking, when the flood came, it was the first rain on earth. To reinforce this idea, it's a fact that no one believed Noah's warning that the flood would come. But that's a topic for another video. Third, we see a faithful man, Enoch, living among a tongue-in-cheek generation, much like Elijah during the time of King Ahab. At a certain point, Elijah was the only prophet of God left, outnumbered by 450 prophets of the enemy. Extra-biblical information about Enoch. As we know, practically nothing is mentioned about Enoch's story in the canonical Bible. Let's step into what some might consider thin ice now. I want to emphasize that what I'm about to say is not in the canonical Bible. Brothers and sisters, depending on which Christian tradition you come from, you may consider the Book of Enoch canonical. However, in this video, we will operate on the understanding that the canonical Bible is composed solely of the 66 books of the Old and New Testaments, as we normally know them, thus placing the Book of Enoch as pseudonymous. In other words, it's a book where an author self-identified as Enoch, in this case, a man using a pseudonym. Many believe that the Bible actually quotes the Book of Enoch in Jude 1:14-15 and 2, Peter 2:4-6. Both passages seem to draw portions from the tradition found in the Book of Enoch. In both cases, the Book of Enoch is an apocalyptic text that discusses the end of the world, angels, the Nephilim, prophecies, and punishments for the wicked post-flood. It's a somewhat parallel text to what we see happening in the apocalypse. As Christians, we live in an increasingly morally depraved world that will eventually come to an end. We can see parallels in the story of Enoch with the story of the apocalypse. Still living in a wicked world, we are called to be righteous and walk in faith with God. Although many of us, if not all of us, will experience the pains of death, Christians in the end times will experience a rapture. It's important to note in 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18 that as many Christians who have already died, as many who are still alive, will participate in this event together. So, in any case, we will experience the rapture. During this time, we will meet Jesus in the clouds, as it says, "Then we who are alive, who are left, will be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so we will always be with the Lord." The heresies of John D. and Edward Kelley. Enochain, the mysterious language of angels. Enochain is a mysterious language that 16th century occultists, John D. and Edward Kelley, recorded in their private journals. They claimed that this celestial discourse allowed magicians and occultists to communicate with angelic realms. They asserted that they received this language from angels, providing the basis for a language with which to communicate with the other side. This angel language contained its own alphabet and grammar. In summary, they wrote a diary about this new language, which they called Enochain. The name comes from John D.'s claim that the biblical patriarch Enoch was the last human to know this language. It is documented that they used certain objects, such as a black obsidian mirror and a crystal ball, to experience these visions. They acted as orators, directing prayers to God and the archangels for 15 minutes to an hour. Then, a piece of evidence was placed on the table, and the angels were called to manifest themselves. The two would observe the stones and record everything they saw and heard. They were informed by the angels that this magic would give them superhuman powers, would change the political structure of Europe, and would announce the arrival of the apocalypse. Dee believed that what he was doing would be beneficial for posterity and documented the information in a series of manuscripts and booklets. He never described the language used during the sessions as Enochain, preferring to call it angelical, celestial speech, the first language of God and Christ, and particularly Adamic, because he claimed that it was used by Adam in the Garden of Eden to name all creatures of God, who was Enoch. Enoch isn't a very well-known biblical character, especially because he didn't experience death. That's right, the Bible says that Enoch did not die. He is mentioned in both the Old and New Testaments, and in this video, you will understand everything the Bible says about who Enoch was. Before we delve into the story of Enoch, it's important to highlight that the Bible mentions two people with the same name. The first Enoch was Cain's eldest son. Indeed, the biblical text says that Cain named a city after his son. The second person who received the name Enoch in the Bible was the son of Jared, from the lineage of Seth. So, while the first Enoch belonged to Cain's wicked lineage, the second Enoch belonged to Seth's righteous lineage, which preserved the knowledge of God. Obviously, it was Enoch from Seth's lineage who became known for being caught up to heaven. Despite highlighting his lineage, the Bible also reveals that Enoch was the father of Methuselah. This means that Enoch was the father of the man who lived the longest in human history, 969 years. However, Methuselah was not Enoch's only son. The Bible says that Enoch had sons and daughters, but their names are not recorded in the biblical text. The Bible also states that Enoch had a deep relationship with God. This is clear in the biblical statement that Enoch walked with God. Interestingly, of all the characters in the Bible, this expression, walked with God, is applied only to Enoch and Noah. It's worth mentioning here that Noah was Enoch's great-grandson. The biblical text states that Enoch lived 365 years in great communion with God and was no more found. Subsequently, the same text explains Enoch's disappearance, saying that God took him to himself. Some scholars suggest that perhaps the 365 years attributed to Enoch are a symbolic number, corresponding to the days of a solar year, possibly indicating a complete and privileged life. The difficulty with this suggestion is that the text of Genesis 5 is a genealogical record that does not seem to employ symbolic language. Furthermore, if Enoch's age is considered symbolic, then why wouldn't the longevity of the other patriarchs in this chapter also be symbolic? If the ages of the other patriarchs are to be understood literally, then probably the best option is also to understand Enoch's age as literal. If correct, then Enoch was the pre-diluvian biblical patriarch who lived the least on earth, in contrast to his son Methuselah, who was the patriarch who lived the most. But as the text highlights Enoch's communion with God and the way God took him, what is clear is that a life in the immediate presence of God is an even greater privilege than having a long life on earth. The biblical information that God took Enoch to himself has generated some discussions among biblical interpreters. Some Jewish traditions, for example, do not consider that the text of the book of Genesis states that Enoch was caught up. According to these traditions, the statement that God took Enoch to himself is just a poetic way the biblical writer found to speak of the early death of a righteous man. But within Christianity, there is no doubt that the writer of the book of Genesis really states that Enoch was caught up to be bodily in the presence of God. Indeed, this is the interpretation adopted by the writer of the letter to the Hebrews, writing, "By faith Enoch was taken away so as not to see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. Since before his removal, he had obtained the testimony that he had pleased God. So, for those who believe in the full inspiration and inerrancy of the Bible, the best interpretation is to understand that Enoch was indeed caught up to heaven. Thus, Enoch and Noah, along with the prophet Elijah, were the two men in the Old Testament who did not experience death. And in a way, what happened to these two men of God foreshadows the future rapture of the Church of Christ. Furthermore, Enoch's catching up is also particularly important because it shows that immortality was taught from the earliest period of the Old Testament. Enoch in the New Testament and the Book of Enoch is mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus in the Gospel of Luke and appears in the gallery of the heroes of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. In this text, the biblical writer attributes Enoch's catching up to his remarkable faith, which led him to a testimony that pleased God. Enoch is also mentioned by Jude in his epistle, which says that Enoch prophesied about divine judgment against the wicked. Scholars discuss how Jude mentioned Enoch. This is because the New Testament writer made an almost literal quotation from the apocryphal Book of Enoch. What is usually discussed is whether Jude actually quoted the apocryphal work, or whether he took the oral tradition that was also employed in the apocryphal work. And this point leads us to make some considerations about the Book of Enoch, or rather, about the books of Enoch, since at least 3 books bearing the name Enoch have been found with similar content. They are the first Book of Enoch, the second Book of Enoch, the third Book of Enoch. The most famous of these 3 books, the first Book of Enoch, is known for its Ethiopian version. This book existed in the apostolic period and is also known by some church fathers, such as Clement of Alexandria, Irenaeus, and Tertullian. However, its original manuscript eventually disappeared, leaving only fragments in Greek and Ethiopian. Despite the book suggesting a supposed authorship by Enoch, the earliest date for the authorship of the fragments found ranges from 200 BC, extending to the end of the 1st century. Therefore, scholars consider that the books connected to Enoch's name have no chance of actually having been written by the biblical Enoch. But according to interpreters, it may be possible that the Book of Enoch contains at least some quotes from Enoch himself, which were preserved and transmitted by oral tradition. For me personally, the Book of Enoch is not necessary for my knowledge, but this is a personal opinion of mine. I respect those who may disagree. The 66 books, in my opinion, are enough, but of course, it does not rule out other historical extra-biblical sources, such as the Dead Sea Scrolls found in 1947. These things, brothers and sisters, are great for our knowledge. And what do you say there? What did you think of Enoch's brief story? Have you read the Book of Enoch? Write your opinions on this subject in the comments below. And that was the video. Beloved, if you liked this video, leave your like